That'll wake everybody up. Well, again, good morning, gentlemen, and really good to see you here again. And I'm enjoying that we have this large room that we can spread out in and have some people attend who hadn't had a chance to do that before. And so welcome to them. By the way, this meeting was not arranged by artificial intelligence. Yeah, in spite of unverified rumors that older men needed that kind of help. Okay. Sometimes we get no respect, huh? You know, I'm just kidding. Anyway, let me update you on a couple of items. Future meetings next month. We're going to, I remind you, we're going to have Jacob Kuykendall. That's Chief Jacob. He's going to tell you about living Indian and how he grew up in an Indian village. We don't have any plans yet really for October and beyond, except that we have been considering the possibility of repeating our Oktoberfest and T-shirt contest, which we had our initial one before COVID, and people tended to enjoy that. And during a T-shirt contest, what we did for you who were not here at that time, we had men wear T-shirts, and they could be old T-shirts, they could be really ratty T-shirts, they could be T-shirts with unusual designs or whatever the person wanted to present, because there was a contest. And we had different categories for the rattiest one, the oldest one, etc. And so we're thinking in terms of maybe having that again. And that Oktoberfest, we had lots of German beer that was ordered for us. And I hope that we'll be able to do that again for people. And we'll have beer then for people that don't want alcoholic beverages. But we'll see if we can get some original German beer for it. Well, we could get an oompa band too, and I don't know. We'll see. Since we don't collect dues or anything like that, we have no money to give to a speaker, and we have no money, of course, to give to an oompa band. So, again, we're going to try to accommodate other residents by electronic means. This session was going to be recorded, and hopefully it'll be on YouTube. We learned a terrible lesson the first time we tried to do this, and we weren't able to put David Bamberger's talk on, but fortunately, David volunteered to do it again for the rest of the community. I want to thank the activities directors, Adrian and Elizabeth and Paul's dining staff, who are now ensuring that our luncheons receive both the logistic and informational support. And they've been doing a good job in setting up for us and serving us at least sandwiches. Maybe in the future, we hope that we can upgrade the menu a little bit, hopefully. I don't know. That's a tough question. So anyway, let's get on with what we're going to hear for today. And I'd like Tom Smith to introduce our speaker. Tom has arranged for our speaker and has a special connection with him. Go ahead, Tom.
Everybody hear me? Yeah. Okay. I guess I have a special connection. I first met our speaker when he walked into my introduction to park management class at West Valley College over 30 years ago. And I saw in this guy a passion for being a park ranger and doing that job. And then for some reason, I kept track of him over 30 years now. He's kind of like my park son in a lot of ways. But his movement through county parks has been very quick and upward. He started as a seasonal. A seasonal is somebody that works part-time, and usually in the summer, and usually when you're in college. And soon as Don graduated from Humboldt after he transferred from West Valley, he got a full-time job with the county parks. And we got a new director, and he started a program in resource management. And Don was urged to apply for that. I think I did a lot of that too. But he didn't want to give up his badge. But he applied and got it. Then from there, he had the opportunity to develop all the policy for managing the natural resources of one of the largest regional park districts in the country. So then he became deputy director. And 5 years ago, 5 years ago, Don became the director. So I'd like to introduce to you, my good buddy, my park son, Don Rocha.
Well, thank you, Smitty. It's quite the introduction. And you, as usual, you kind of took my intro, which was introduce myself, why I'm here today. But, in all seriousness, this is an interesting cycle of life, right? For me, going to West Valley, being instructed by Smitty, and then having your mentor, and then coming back and speaking to your mentor and being asked to speak before this group. It's a real honor to be here, and a little intimidating speaking before your mentor along the way as well, even now.
Even if I gave you a C.
Even if you gave me a C last time, well, it's kind of an inside joke, but the last time I gave a talk for Smitty when, in class, he gave me a hard time because I didn't tailor to my audience, and we went on a hike at a park that is a little bit steep, but it was all students except for him. So he was the audience I was focused on, that I didn't tailor my talk to him. And he was the grader, so I guess he had a point. But I will never concede to it. So a little bit about my background, that's fill in some of the blanks about that Smitty introduced. I did go through West Valley, became a seasonal park ranger. It's really a unique position to be able to go through an organization the way I did. I was a seasonal and a park ranger for a number of years. It's interesting, in the late 90s, our department actually had its first developed its first natural resource plan, and it was really around cattle grazing, and utilized cattle grazing as a resource management tool. And we just had an outside consultant do it, and really it was a response to complaints we were getting from the public about the impacts cattle were having on our trail system in our parks. So it wasn't necessarily a natural resource plan. It was really a response to how do we have this co-management. And from there, just from the training and having somebody like Smitty that I can bounce ideas with, I implemented that plan as a park ranger. And then, and it's just the passion that I have. I'm a wildlife biologist by education and training. I saw a lot of issues that the Parks Department had in dealing with natural resources and managing those resources. And working with Smitty, we developed plans, and ultimately it turned into creating the natural resource program, developing policies for the natural resources and how we manage natural resources. And of course, then that turned into spreading into the trail system and making sure that our trails are built in a way that has accessibility into them. And then also, how is it going to be compatible with the natural resources and protecting cultural and historical natural resources? And I'll talk a little bit about that later. But then, it's like, I created these policies, developed this trails program and natural resource program. Why not have an influence on, the policies of the organization moving forward? So I was promoted to deputy director in charge of land stewardship, administration, acquisitions as well. And part of that, at least in my strategy, was making sure that all those pieces are blending together, right? We are a dual purpose agency, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but resource protection, cultural, historical, natural resource protection is core to who we are as a parks department. But it's also about how do you do that in a way that allows and invites people to come into a system and learn and connect with natural resources. And especially coming out of COVID, we really found that the parks are a place for people to have that renewed spirit, a place to go out. Even just going into and having access to green space is a way to de-stress, right? Get away from the everyday life, get away from the stresses of traffic and everything else, job, work, all those things, right? And just going out into nature just has this calming effect on people. And we really found through COVID and coming out of COVID how important it is for the public to have access. One of the things that I am proud of, one of the things I'm proud of in being the park director over the last 5 years, and unfortunately 3 years of that was 2.5+ years of that was during COVID, which had an impact on the things I wanted to do as an organization. But one of the benefits is that, the things I'm proud of, as I mentioned, is really around, we were one of the only agencies that stayed open throughout COVID. We never closed our doors. We stayed open. It was important for our board of supervisors, important for the county executive and Sarah Cody and public health and others to make sure people had some place to go, right? At that time, during lockdowns and everything else, you really couldn't go anywhere. And most agencies were, social distancing and other elements, which we were concerned as well. And we posted a lot of signs. We did close areas of gathering. But it was important to us to make sure that people had a place to go, that they had a place to renew their spirit, had a place to be able to commune with nature and connect with nature. And the outcome of that was amazing for us because we saw a huge spike in use, a huge spike in people that had no idea that their county park system even existed because it was the only place to go. So we had this gigantic spike in use, which created some operational things for us to make sure people were safe, which we dealt with. And we worked very closely with Sarah Cody and her group to make sure people were safe. But that then sustained as we're all started to deal with COVID and coping with COVID and things started returning back to normal. We are still seeing an increase in the number of people that are coming to our park system, which is one of the things we're really proud of as an organization, because, you know, being one of the only agencies that remained open is just incredible to provide that service to the public and that outlet for the public. So that's a little bit about myself. First, you know, the thing I always like to start off with, this is your county park system, right? We are, as a Parks Department, we are honored to manage and steward it on behalf of residents of Santa Clara County. But over 55,000 acres of parkland, which belongs to all of you. Over 300 plus miles of trails, over 120 of which are paved. I'll talk a little about some of the unique services that we provide, but there is a difference that I'd like to start off with. One is of a park system. One is the dark green shade that's Santa Clara County Parks. So that's our regional park system. The light green are other publicly owned land management agencies like state parks. This is Henrico. But Mid-Peninsula Open Space District, the Open Space Authority, some of those other large landowners. But what you can see on this map is that, you know, from a landscape standpoint, there is a lot of land that's protected and preserved in perpetuity for future generations to enjoy and connect and to manage landscapes and protect our watersheds, our air quality and others, right, through stewardship of open space and parklands and natural resource landscapes. But also, as important, as you can see, a lot of these lands are interconnected, especially on the west side, on this side, on the far side of the map, is that wildlife connectivity, those types of elements, right, to make sure ecosystems are functioning properly, make sure that we have clean water, we have healthy forests to help us with climate resiliency, especially dealing with climate change and how we're going to be resilient to climate change in the future. All these lands are interconnected on the west side, and we're trying to do the same thing on the east side and make sure that we have good connections so that we can protect our watersheds, both for human health, but for ecology and for the ecology of others and the ecology of us, right? This is our quality of life. One of the things that residents of Santa Clara County identified really early with, I'm not going to get into the details, but if people ask questions, I'll be happy to answer, is like the designation in 1972 of having a park charter fund, which is an existing property tax, but it guarantees a carve out of that existing property tax to come to Santa Clara County Parks to preserve and protect and manage open space. And that's very important, right, to a quality of life of citizens of Santa Clara County. And something that's been renewed every 15 years or so, it gets renewed. It passes overwhelmingly because this is important to the residents. And it's important to us to begin to be the stewards of your landscape, to make sure you have accessibility and ensure that we have good air quality, water quality, and others to preserve our landscapes and ecosystems that help us all. And with the changes in climate change, it's becoming more and more important. But then, as I mentioned before, with human health and dealing with things like the pandemic, it really came to the forefront about what these landscapes mean to everybody, not only from the typical ecological landscapes and being able to get out there and do physical recreation, mountain biking, hiking, and others, but just the human spirit and just the mental health benefits that these open space areas provide people. Even, you know, studies in sociology have shown even if you're not able to get out there, knowing that these landscapes are there provides people this calming effect and gives them an ability. But just, you know, having access is a key, and I'll talk about access a little bit later. So the mission of Santa Clara County Parks that I talked about before, we are a dual purpose agency, right? Smitty likes to drill, you know, during West Valley, drills into the 4 Ps. We have 3 of them. Provide, protect, and preserve are the areas that are primary to our mission. And our mission is really about making sure that we're preserving and protecting these landscapes. And that means more than just acquiring lands. That means more than just the physical landscape stewardship that we're doing by doing habitat restoration projects and things like that, and making sure our lands are available. But it's also that programming. It's that element of bringing program and bringing education so people have this connection to their landscape, connection to natural resources, connection to their open space areas, again, to help renew that spirit, but also understand the importance of what these landscapes offer. And of course, that education is also part of historical and cultural preservation, and making sure people really understand the history and the diversity and the history of Santa Clara Valley is really rich with flavor, right? So it's up to us as a Parks Department to make sure that we're educating people on that rich history, the indigenous people that come before us, the contributions of many different nationalities and others into Santa Clara Valley, the Valley of Heart's Delight. We have our first historical park at Marshall Cottle, which was opened in 2014. And that's the primary message coming out of that park, is really about the contributions of so many different people into the Valley of Heart's Delight and that historical ranching and agriculture that was the beginnings of Santa Clara Valley. So, excuse me. So it's very important for that. And of course, for us, you know, that it's really about the future, right? It's not just us now that's utilizing the park system and managing the system. It's not about our forefathers before. It's really about the future of our parks and connecting with children. There's more and more of a deficit of open space and connection that our youth are having to open space and parklands and ecology, and the importance of ecology and the meaning of ecology. So it's really important for us to be able to reach out and make a connection to our youth, as they are our future, and they're the ones that, you know, are really going to help us solve a lot of these climate resiliency elements, right? So making sure that they have a connection to our landscapes is really important to us as a Parks Department. And then the vision is just another encapsulation of that, right? Everything we do, being a dual purpose agency, provide, protect, and preserve of these natural landscapes, it's really about having that connection. How do we protect and provide these education opportunities to people while people are accessing and having recreation opportunities, right? There's a lot of agencies out there that are out there to just preserve landscapes, right? Our national parks and others have a lot of areas that have minimal entry and minimal access available, right? Because they're preserves, they're reserves, and others. Your park system being in these areas that are really close to human centers are really important to us to make sure that people have access and that we balance that access, that we want to make sure everybody comes into a park system, they feel welcome, they have access, something that we're improving, and I'll talk about this a little bit later. But at the same time, we're balancing that with stewardship. How do we manage that access and minimize what the impact is on the natural resources? When you build a trail, obviously you're disrupting those natural resources, those waterways and others. Can you build those in a way that minimizes that impact, that still allows people out there? People are a vector for certain things, diseases and others, that bring out invasive plants and others. How do we manage that so that people still have access to the landscape, but we're minimizing what that impact of the landscape is? That's our job as stewards. Your job is to help us protect this. Your job is to help us to give us ideas on how we can make you feel welcome, make sure that you have the access that you all need. And then we figure out as park professionals, how do we blend those two things to make sure we're providing, protecting, and preserving. So that's what our vision is. And then I love this picture, and I always pull out this historical picture because, you know, an early park person, that's my wife and my son. So it's a talk. So as you can tell, my voice changed because, you know, the future generations at parks, he wants to come back and work for the Parks Department. Of course, he can't with me as a director. But getting the youth engaged in that level is that's what it's all about for us. And that's more the emotional part for me, is seeing photos like that. Really special to see my son on there, but it's really about those connections. And those are really the most meaningful things to me when I was a park ranger, is having those interactions and those moments. So it's really important for us. Our ranger staff are not armed. They're there to protect and preserve and provide. And I'll talk about this a little bit later, but they're there to educate. They're really there to drop on a knee in a situation like that and make a connection with everybody who comes into our system. And that's what your park system is all about. So that's kind of our vision. But there's elements of the vision, and I'm going to go over each one of these, but these are the last words. So you'll be able to see pretty pictures after this. And I'll be brief when I talk about them. But again, those elements of us being able to do the things that I talked about before, meet our mission, meet our vision. It's all about making sure that we're inclusive and we're interconnecting, right? It's a matter of making sure that you all have access and all of our landscapes are interconnected. And that's what we're working with our management partners on. And that's what we work with all of you on as well, and the citizens of Santa Clara County. It's about resource stewardship, and resource stewardship is not just natural, it's historical and cultural, making sure that all the contributors of Santa Clara Valley, the Valley of Heart's Delight, the indigenous peoples and others, making sure that we're recognizing and making sure that everybody comes into Santa Clara Valley and into the regional park system in particular, feel welcome and have that ability to access parks and be able to renew their spirit, feel connected to open space, and be able to recreate. Operational excellence to us is just ensuring that we are there to serve the customer. We are there to serve all of you, right? There's going to be times where there's going to be conflict between use and resource protection. And it's our job as park professionals to solve those problems, to make sure that you all have the access that you deserve into your regional park system. And then of course, it's not just saying, here's the doors are open, go, here's our trail system. It's really, how do we enrich that visitor experience? And a lot of that is making sure the park feels welcome, make sure the park feels like people can go and be able to do the things that they want to do and they can do in a system, and that we're accessible to everybody. And that's something that we're improving as a system. And of course, I've talked about human health and what that means about the human spirit. So interconnectedness is really about the landscapes. And it's really about making sure wildlife corridors are connecting, our waterways are connecting, there are minimal impacts on our waterway. As those waters come down off the hills in the upper watershed, which is primarily what the park system protects, it goes into our reservoirs, which Valley Water protects and manage. And then that water eventually goes into our aquifers. This is a primary drinking source for all of us. So how do we have sufficient clean water, and how do we do that? And it's really through habitat restoration, habitat management, invasive weeds, diseases, development, all have an impact on our waterways and what that quality of water is for us. Park systems like ours and open space areas protect that for all of us. And as I mentioned before, it's really about inclusiveness. The top picture is an example of one of our, what we call single track trails. One of the things you can't really tell in this picture, it doesn't really show very well, but actually that trail is 6 to 7 feet wide. So multi-users, bikes, horses, dogs coming in other directions. You can put dogs on opposite side of people and have plenty of room to get by without having an impact. And that's what we're all about, trying to get as many people on a trail system as we can. And our interpretive talks are really about bringing in as many people as we can from diverse groups and others. We're trying to work more with community-based organizations to bring in speakers that may look and sound like, and have be able to speak languages of people that we may not be able to represent very well, so that we can make sure everybody feels welcome in our park system. And we just opened last Saturday, we just opened our first ADA dock at Vasona County Park, so that people who are mobility impaired have an opportunity to go kayaking with the family. It was really touching to go out there for the dedication and see families going out on a kayak at Vasona that people that didn't have an opportunity because they don't always have access in a wheelchair to be able to go out there and actually be on a kayak with their two small children and their wife. And it was the first time that they were able to do that recreational activity together. So providing that access is really core to what we do as an organization. And for us, it's really about, it's about you and making sure that all of you and the citizens have access to the park system, but it's about these guys too, right? We want to make sure that we are protecting and preserving these wildlife and opportunities for, not only my son's grandchildren and his children, but their grandchildren and their children, right? It's really about making sure future generations have the ability to enjoy the things that all of us have enjoyed with open space and park areas, and making sure that, these species are there for the future. And that's that interconnectedness and working with them. And of course, that interacts with our resource stewardship. We utilize a lot of different ways to manage our stewards. The upper picture on the right are goats. So you heard me talk previously about cattle. We use cattle to help manage our grasslands. We also use goats to help manage our landscapes, to bring goats out and help feed on invasive plants. We are getting more and more into prescribed fire. So you'll be seeing, on correct days, because we don't want the air pollution to be an impact on people's human health. So there's very strict prescriptions that we write, that we have fires, that we prescribe fires. In the last, I think it's 3 weeks ago, we burned about 280 acres at Grant Park. unfortunately, Lisa wasn't able to make it that day, but she helped us get it all set up for that burn. But we were able to do a lot more prescribed fire. In the early 2000s, we were able to burn about 1,000 acres a year. So we're trying to gear back up again to help us manage our landscapes, to have a healthy ecosystem, which helps those wildlife I showed before, but also again, our water systems and clean water and others. And of course, on the left side, we can't go without talking about our historical and cultural resources and those protections. The lower picture on the left-hand side is the Miller site ruin. So it's a summer home of Henry Miller, who was a cattle baron in Santa Clara County. His summer home was at Mount Madonna County Park. So these are the ruins of his summer home. He had 3 homes up there. So protecting and providing for that, and then giving educational programs so the youth don't forget about those types of historical connections. The Casa Grande is a picture above that. That's at our Almaden and Quicksilver. That used to be a mining office when we mined mercury up in Almaden Quicksilver in the old days. So that's also now a historical site for the public to enjoy. A lot of school programs are at Casa Grande to really teach people about the history of gold mining and others, but also the important role that Santa Clara Valley and Almaden Quicksilver in particular played in the gold mining of California. And operational excellence is really making sure that, as I talked about before, we have the skills, we are innovative, we want to hear from all of you about how we can improve, and we want to be innovative on how we make this park system that works for everybody, right? It's really hard when you have over 2 million people in Santa Clara Valley and you have visitors from others coming in, but it's really about making sure the parks is accessible and that we're balancing the stewardship activities with the needs of the community, especially residents of Santa Clara Valley. So providing the right tools, having our staff properly trained in fire is really important coming out of with climate change and coming out of the drought. As all of us are aware, with climate change and the amount of wildfires we've had recently, especially during the drought of the last few years, our ranger staff actually have been relieving fire crews so they can go back to their stations or they can go out to other fires to minimize the time that they're tied up on a fire that may happen in one of our park systems. Because of the training and equipment we've been able to provide our ranger staff, and because of the work we've done to manage wildland fires within our system, we've been able to relieve some of that from the fire agency. So that's really important to us. Providing the proper boating equipment. We do manage the reservoirs. So any boating under the influence or things like that, unsafe boaters, it's really managed by our park rangers. So making sure that they have the proper equipment. As I was telling Smitty this morning, somebody ended up in one of our reservoirs last night, no injuries, but the vehicle ended up. So our rangers are out there with the sheriff's office and the dive team. Our patrol boats are helping with the sonar to find the vehicle so the dive team can be safe in getting it out of the reservoir. But it's all in those cooperations of making sure that we have the proper equipment and management. And this is the most important picture, right? It's that connection with the youth and teaching the youth, here's a park ranger teaching them what they do, showing all the different jobs that a park ranger does. It's these type of interactions that create that curiosity in our youth and the importance of what these open space and park lands provide. So that's the most important thing. The other element our park rangers are especially, important is that they are law enforcement. It's hard to see here because it's kind of cut off with this badge, but they look just like law enforcement. They are law enforcement. They're full peace officers. They just don't have a weapon. So it's really important to break that stigma of possibly law enforcement because a park ranger has a different role. This is the ranger role, is to get on his knee, work with children directly, but that can translate to, hey, these law enforcement people aren't all that bad, right? So here's this opportunity for us to make a connection with the community in a different way. So with all that said, we have a lot of work to do as well. So, that was all about really connectedness and human connections. But, in order to do that, we do all of this, right? So one thing is that our parks department, a lot of people don't realize we have engineers, we have planners, we have project managers, we have specialized trail crew people, we have volunteers. There's a ranger cleaning up a dump site, but that was all collected by volunteers. So having all those management but for construction, it's very important for us to make sure, again, that we're connected with all of you. We're connected with the citizens of Santa Clara to meet their needs. The lower left-hand picture is is our gun range that we have. And of course, the storm damage that we saw with all the flooding this year, and being able to manage the floods. And of course, making sure that we have areas that are built properly to make sure, again, that we're stewarding our lands appropriately and providing access. As I mentioned before, enriched visitor experience is one of those key elements and one of the most important elements that we have. And you can see in these pictures, children are involved in everything we do. It's really a connection to children, but providing a lot of opportunities, education opportunities for our staff to interconnect and meet with children and educate children about the resources, both cultural, historical, and natural. Making sure we're providing them safe places to play. We have a number of playgrounds in our system. Interconnecting and making sure that they understand the wildlife and understand natural resources and understand the importance of natural resources and what it means to them in the future. All of that is important to us, because that enriching those experiences lead to human health and making sure that people are healthier and connected, both from the physical landscape, again, of clean water and dealing with climate change and climate resiliency, but also spiritual and human health benefits that the parks provide, and being able to provide that through our trail system and their different recreational experiences that we offer. So quickly, I want to just kind of, talk a little bit about what we offer. As a regional parks agency, we're very different than a city park. So even though we have some elements of turf areas and playgrounds, we are regional parks. We are more closely aligned with a state park system than a city park system. However, we provide a lot. We're being positioned that way allows us to provide a lot of unique recreational opportunities. As you saw in the previous photograph, we have a gun range, right? We have a motorcycle park for people to be able to ride their motorcycles near home. We at Vasona, we provide these paddle boats. We also have paddle boarding. We have sailing programs. We have interpretive programs on the bay. We have a yurts at Mount Madonna, and camping. We have 5 campgrounds within our park system. We have hang gliding in our park system. We have a lot of unique recreational opportunities that we're able to provide. From that very first slide you saw, 55,000 acres. We have a lot of landscape to allow people to provide them various recreational opportunities, and that's what we're all about. But with that, we also offer visitor centers. But we also have unique festivals and other things that we provide. Right down the street from you is we have Fantasy Lights every Christmas at Vasona. So providing that amenity for people during Christmas time. This underlying picture is a campground along Coyote Lake, overlooking the reservoir at Coyote Lake. But again, we have much more access. The previous picture you saw dogs. Previous picture you saw, and here you see bikes. We're a little unique from other agencies because we are about making sure people feel comfortable in their system and making sure people have access, is that we do allow e-bikes to allow people to have pedal assist, so that people that may have less ability have access still, by allowing them to use e-bikes and be able to use pedal, and it's not just about, seniors and others. It's really about all people, right? Going up some of these steep trails, children have a hard time going up some of them. So allowing e-bikes allows people more access to these areas and more recreational abilities and access and ability. We have visitor centers to make sure that we can educate people about our system. We do offer a lot of festivals. This is at Marshall Cottle. It's a branding. Actually, this is at Joyce Burnell. It's showing children what branding was like back in the day. We have the Fandango, which is also at Joyce Burnell. And then this is another picture at Joyce Burnell. This was a National Night Out event. But we do have festivals. We have an upcoming fall festival at Marshall Cottle County Park in October. We have Day on the Bay also in October coming up. So we do a number of festivals, and we're trying to increase those. So that's kind of your park system, right? I think that's what the main things I wanted to make sure that you all knew about your park system. I can't reiterate it enough. We are honored to be the stewards of your land. This is your land, your parks. I do want to close with some of the things that we're moving towards as an agency. We are reaching out to a lot of different groups for diversity and equitable access and making sure people have access to their park system. It's definitely an area of improvement for our park system. Our park system was primarily designed in the 70s and 80s and built in the 70s and 80s. And of course, standards and needs have changed since then. So it's taking a lot of money to try to figure out how do we, make it accessible to a lot of different people. So we have a learning curve, and we also have, a need to build more. Like I said, it took us we should have built an ADA dock years ago, right? I mean, to allow people who have limited ability to be able to get on a kayak with their children. That's something we could have done, we should have done years ago, but we have it now. So we're trying to reach out, we're trying to understand the needs of a lot of different groups so that everybody feels welcome and has access to the parks. Hopefully, you guys get involved as well. I can help, I can facilitate that with Smitty. We do have some surveys and things going out now and outreach going out now to different groups because we do want to make sure our system is available. We have, like I said, we have over 120 miles of paved trails. In the trail system alone, we have switched to building trails that are all accessible. So for backcountry. So the state of California does not have requirements for backcountry trails, but the Fed does. And we've been following the federal designs along with state parks to build trails that are accessible to everybody. It's really hard in some of the landscapes because you can't get the compaction of soils here. Because those of you that have been out in these natural areas with our clay soils and our other soils, it's really hard to get a good firm soil in Santa Clara Valley outside of the valley floor. So we are trying different things to try to harden those up. But most of our trails, our new trails that we're building are 0 to 5% grades. They have minimal outslope, but enough outslope to protect the landscape. So it's really built with the idea of making sure everybody has access to it. When I created the program and started setting those standards and those policies, I always looked to my mother-in-law, who's now isn't with us anymore, but she was in her late 70s at the time, but she was living up in Tahoe, still hiking up until the day she passed. She was still up in Tahoe hiking, 20 plus 16 miles, up in Tahoe. So it's like the abilities, it's not about the abilities, it's about making sure everybody has access to a system, right? It's not about targeting certain groups because my mother-in-law would hike me into the ground, right? When we're up in Sierras and down here. So it's making sure that we're building things that have everybody in mind, from the little child to the 70-year-old, like my mother-in-law that has access, to make sure everybody has access. So that's what we're about as a system, and that's what we're striving towards and improving on. So with that, I'll be happy to turn it over to questions.
Unless you talk about the Allen and Quicksilver Park and its relationship to the Civil War and Abraham Lincoln.
That could be a talk for a future when I can have one of my interpreters here who can actually give it its true due, right? Because it's I don't know all the history at Allen and Quicksilver in particular, so I'll bring somebody. I'll work with Smitty to bring somebody here who can talk about that much better than I would be able to. Sure.
Minerals that they had there. Abraham Lincoln sent them out to make a contract with this park, with this area, so that he could get the metal out first before the sun.
Oh yeah, I'm going to circle back with my interpreted staff because that's something that I was not aware of that. Yes. No, so Mount Umunhum is actually managed by Mid-Peninsula Open Space District. We do have Allen and Quicksilver, which butts up against it as part of that mosaic of landscapes that connect, but it's actually managed by Mid-Peninsula. It's in the county, correct? Yep. Yeah.
I understand that there's a story behind Marshall Park being a county park, not a city park.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So Marshall Lester, who donated the park to the county, had a lot of issues with the city, and did not. And he was very, very adamant and actually put it in the deed restriction of the park that it's not going to be a city park. It will not be managed by the city of San Jose, and it was designated basically as a county park at that time. The thing that we really need to do is working with the state park system. So we couldn't partner with the city of San Jose because Marshall Lester was not going to allow us to have that. It was a restriction of the deed. So we worked with state parks to work out the acquisition of part of the landscape, and then he donated the rest to Santa Clara County. But he did put very strict restrictions in there that it was not going to be a city park. It had to be a regional park. It had to talk about the agricultural history and others, which of course is more of what we do than the city does. So that's kind of the history behind it, is that Marshall Lester was not going to allow that to be a city park.
You know what the city did to Marshall?
There was a lot of different things that the city, he was the last holdout, right? I mean, it's amazing to see, and you know, I should have put that picture on here, but to see the development all around that landscape that he held out, and part of it was annexed because the city kind of forced it, which also didn't help with the relationship, but it is the county of Santa Clara, the majority of that landscape. So he did not allow it to be annexed. It was going to be open space, and you know, the city and others were pressuring to develop because that's the last kind of green space, a large green space in Santa Clara Valley. And that was a lot of the issues that he had with the city were around preserving that. And he really wanted that as a legacy to the family. And it's just amazing going out there. I was out there during the negotiations and during the acquisition, and now we still haven't gone through everything that he donated and left for us. But his family had it in their DNA, or I don't know how they prepared for this way back from the early settlers. But their original wagon that came from Missouri is still in the barn. Their clothes, games. I don't think going through the things that we have and talking to Mr. Lester when we were going through the negotiations with him, looking at the things he had that was still in the original boxes and labeled. Everything was in their original box and labeled. It's like, here's your Christmas gift of 1912, right? From some member. It's like, go play for it for a day, put it back in the box, and it had a label. It's just amazing on the things that was in their original packaging, and everything was labeled. So we have so much history there that right now that's what our interpreters are working on primarily, is inventorying it all and figuring out what is the interpreted message here, because we have everything from the original wagon that came across to the last days that he farmed at Marshall Cottle in 2000.
The nightgown was still on the bed.
Yes, absolutely, and it had a label on it. It's just the brush at the table this little like a makeup type table, getting ready table. Everything was labeled. It had labels on everything that was there. This was the hairbrush that niece whoever used it, right? Everything was labeled. It's amazing that they had that legacy, and I think that was part of his kind of conflict with the city, is that the family had it in mind that this was going to be used for this way way back when. So it's right off of Highway 85. So we're 85 right by Gunderson High School. There's an open green space right there, right on Branham and Snell, at the intersection of Branham and Snell. And it's about 312 acre green space that's just right in middle of development. We are working right now. We were very fortunate to get funds from Senator Cortese. He gave us $5 million of state money to help us implement the historic park, the historic ranch part of the park. The park is open. The primary park is open. The historic area is not open yet, because when we acquired it from him, we also said you can live on here until he passed, right? So he had a living easement to stay on the property, so that when he passed, it then turned over to the Parks Department. So once he passed, we then started our planning efforts, and now we're starting the development efforts. So within the next 3 years or so, we hope to have the parts of the historic ranch open to people to be able to go out there. And part of that is working with the state to really invest in the historic home and really make sure that's all available to people as well. Because like I said, I mean, he has 1954 trucks. He has an old wagon that was used for hauling dairy. I mean, he had anything you think of, he had. It's amazing. Yes.
Who provides the financial resources?
So our primary finances come from all of you. It's called the Park Charter Fund. It's a carve out of existing property tax for Santa Clara County, but it's dedicated to us. So the general fund cannot, per the voters, the general fund cannot utilize Park Charter Fund for anything except for a park purpose. So it's really a dedicated existing tax dedicated to parks, and that's been in place since 1972, and it's been renewed every 12 years. It gets renewed, comes before the voters every 12 years, and it's never passed in less than 70+% support from the county. So it's really all of you that help preserve that money, because in tough financial times, it's hard. Most parks agencies don't have the resources that we have, so we're able to provide lands like this, continue to buy lands and protect lands because of the voters.
Well, if there are no more questions, we want to thank Don for his talk. I never really realized how vast his empire is. He's willing to talk to anybody for a short time after this. If you care to ask him some personal questions or more personal questions, all right, ask Tom. All right. Thank you again, Don. This has been a revelation to me. As long as I've lived here, I never really realized how vast the resources are in Santa Clara County. Thank you. Well, if there are no other questions or whatever, we're adjourned, gentlemen. Thank you. We're just catching up. As usual, Don, we're just catching up now. So that we are reaching out to others now, doing things that Don was bringing up. Hi.